Joining me in the Sydney studio for our regular Friday night chat is economics correspondent Stephen Long. Stephen, the US GDP figures have just been released. What can you tell us?
It's a fascinating story, Lee. With the current figures, the rate of growth has fallen in the second quarter to 2.4%, an annualised pace of 2.4%. And it's the composition of growth that's a worry there, because there isn't a lot of consumption. That's pretty weak. Exports are weak relative to imports. And you also have a massive build-up of inventories, companies stocking up the shelves, but it doesn't seem that people are buying. And the revised figures for the first quarter show that problem writ large as well. The wider fascinating story in these statistics is that they've revised the estimates on US economic growth going back to 2007, and they show that the recession in the United States was far deeper than previously thought, with growth falling by 4.1% between the final quarter of 2007 and mid-2009. That's nearly 0.5% worse than previously estimated, and the rate of household consumption was twice as weak as previously thought. Very interesting.
But those revised figures are retrospective, so I mean, what are the implications of that now? Just knowing that it was deeper than anyone thought, what difference does it make now?
Well, it shows why you had double-digit unemployment in the US and why unemployment is still sticky, a big hole to dig out of. But I would argue that the more pertinent figures ongoing are these really weak growth figures that we're seeing now. 2.4% doesn't look too bad, but when you consider that there's $76 billion in inventories build up in the second quarter, two reasons why those inventories could be building up. One is that business is optimistic and they think people are going to start buying. But I would suggest the more likely explanation is it relates to that surprisingly weak consumption, that they've stocked up in anticipation of the recovery, and the recovery is very, very slow to come.
Do these figures have broader implications for the rest of the world? Everyone's been worried about the prospect of a double-dip recession. Do they shed any sort of further thoughts on that?
Well, we talk a lot about China, and it's growing clearly very rapidly, but the United States is still by far the world's largest economy. It's close to a quarter of global output, so the fact that the US is weak is a major drag on global growth. We also have the Eurozone very, very weak, with the sovereign debt woes continuing and the austerity measures in Europe meaning that the props through government spending to growth are being dragged down. So we're going to have to rely a lot on the emerging market economies in Asia, China, India and the like, to maintain global growth, and these signs are quite worrying.
Stephen Long, thank you. See you next week.
You're welcome.